ready for our next session. This one is called Making Money Mobile, Remittances and Transnational Financial Practices. You know, remittances, I think, remain both one of the greatest transboundary flows of money among the un- and underbanked, but also remain one of the toughest nuts to crack in the industry because the transboundary, transnational nature of it poses a host of logistical and also importantly regulatory challenges. And given that our last panel focused quite a bit on the role of government in financial inclusion and in the provision of payment services for the poor, we thought it appropriate to follow that one with this discussion of remittances and transnational financial practices. I'm very delighted that we were able to secure Alison Truitt here to be the moderator for this panel. She's an associate professor of anthropology at Tulane and the author of a fascinating book that I just taught in my graduate seminar in economic anthropology this quarter, titled Dreaming of Money in Ho Chi Minh City, which looks at the expanding use of money in contemporary Vietnam and the rise of new markets, digital telecommunications, and new forms of mobility. So thank you, Alison, for moderating this panel. I will turn it over to you.
Yes, I'd like to welcome you all. I think those of you who were here yesterday could see how remittances emerged as a very powerful way in which people were both participating in these systems and mediating their relationships with kin and near kin from distant places. So I'd like to welcome you to the panel. And our first presenter is Mariam Sangre, who will be talking on mobile money and financial inclusion in Mali. What has been the impact on saving practices? So I'd like to invite you to the podium.
I am Mariam, and my co-investigator on this project is Isabelle from the French Institute for Research on Development in France. And the project title is Mobile Money and Financial Inclusion in Mali, what has been the impact on saving practices. Due to the fact that we have not completed the surveys and data collection, I will just present today the project, some theoretical backgrounds, our methodology, and some first remarks from the first 5 visits. So, Mali is here in West Africa with its 15 million population and very low access to formal financial services, which reach only 12% of the population. And the project aims to assess the potential of mobile banking in favor of financial inclusion, with particular consideration of its impact on user savings practice. And saving as a focus stems from our previous work in the same area, and which highlights, and which was about microfinance services quality, and highlights the fundamental role of saving services for low-income population in Mali. And excuse me, yes. And in the Malian context, so access to mobile phones has been increasing since 2006, when the leader operator Orange entered the markets. And in 2010, the operators set up the first mobile banking service in Mali called Orange Money. And this set of services primarily worked as a monetary deposit, withdrawal, and transfer services. So as such, they do not allow for borrowing nor for savings against remuneration. But an interesting fact is that users have to pay fees when they withdraw money from their accounts, even if this money has been deposited by themselves or transferred by other persons. So, in order to further our previous results on the importance of saving in this context, we assess whether mobile banking is in a position to meet people's needs of saving services. For example, is it a strong alternative for rural people who are farther away from formal financial agencies, say? And we also assess for which forms of saving it can be used by people. Is it for consumption, precautionary savings, or saving for investment? And we'll look also for differences between somewhat agricultural areas and the Sahelian regions, dependence on remittances from migrants. Now a few words on theoretical backgrounds. Economic theories have been dominated, I would say, a long time by the idea that poor people, low-income people cannot save because they are living in a kind of liquidity trap situation where they haven't enough surplus left for saving. But evidence from many developing countries show that these people have an important and meet saving demand, and also they are accustomed to juggling with different means, different settlements of saving, and some studies show that savings seems to have more transformative impact than microcredit does in some cases. So in this context, a question arises, which is what can explain this under-saving by poor population, by poor people. And economic theories lay out some constraints and barriers which can undermine the effective use of saving services by these people. And these are transaction costs at first, ranging from monetary costs like fees for opening an account, minimum balance requirement, or transaction costs, over transaction costs, from non-monetary costs like time lost in case of geographical remoting, and the lack of trust also can constrain people from saving. For example, a subjective assessment of the reliability of a service can stop them in using it. And the regulatory barriers also matter, particularly prudential regulation aimed to protect consumers, and the financial system can also limit some access by growing administrative costs for clients and for smaller institution. And social constraints also intervene because saving choice depends on the individual position in the household, on their gender, their income earning, and the budget managing. And the social constraint also depends on the integration of individual into social risk sharing networks. And finally, the behavioral basis do matter too, like behavioral basis, yes, like biases in preferences. For example, living for today behavioral can prevent self-commitment to saving, and also in expectation and the price appreciation, interest rates appreciation. And finally, having a regard to these constraint-based theories, we assume that the potential of mobile banking, mobile money in saving access depends on the service features, the mobile money service features, and on the other existing formal and informal means of saving. And the field research through consumer surveys, mobile Orange Money user survey is an important component of this work. In order to investigate the issues, we combine 3 different areas in Mali in these surveys, which are Bamako, the urban area of Bamako, right here, the Sahelian and immigration region of Kais, here, and the agricultural region of Sekasso. And the questionnaire is set up in 3 parts. The first one is on clients' financial profile, whether they use a formal bank account or not, what is their social financial network, and what are their constraints and choice, financial constraint and choice. And the second part is on mobile money usage and interactions with other financial services. And the third part, mobile money use for saving purposes. So we did the first visit in the file in November, during which we met with partners like the mobile phone operator and research partners. We also recruited research assistant, we test questionnaire, and we discussed about sampling method choice. Just to highlight some first remark from this first visit, we can say that the mobile money service is witnessing a growing in its client base, which grew from 800,000 in 2012 to 2 million in 2014. And when we discussed with the provider, it appears that they did not place any saving potential in this service for the user. But they also point some interesting facts. Actually, a lot of people make small deposits in their accounts at a regular basis and for several months or weeks without withdrawing it. And it seems like a saving strategy in this context where people are looking for commitment device and saving discipline. And from the user's point of view, the usage of mobile money service is motivated by accessibility, like geographical proximity and extended access points network, by low transaction cost, so no account opening fees, no minimum balance requirement, and withdrawing fees do not seem to be too high for them. And finally, it's easiness, because they can use it easily, particularly for withdrawing and deposit services. And the next step in this work is the second file visit, which is planned for February, and during which we will conduct customer surveys and data collection in the three concerned areas. And we hope that the survey will permit to understand the involvement of different constraints in the people's choice of using this service, like using it for saving purpose. Transaction cost and confidence do intervene, but other constraints like information gap, behavioral basis, or social constraint will be examined in more detail during the surveys. And the results will also permit to understand the pool's saving demand and strategies, and to understand how much they accept to pay for saving commitment and the saving services. And the results, by shedding light on pool saving strategies, will permit to think about the future of mobile money service in a Malian context, particularly in terms of saving access for the users. That it is. I thank you.
Our next presenters will be Jeremiah Open-Ano and Alvin Eng, and they will be speaking on does financial inclusion spur overseas Filipinos to invest, a remittance investment climate study in a rural hometown. Thank you.
Bonjour, mademoiselle et monsieur. Hola, señorito and señorita. I'm Jeremiah and he's Alvin. No thanks to ethics approval issues, the title was changed, but we're here and we're thankful to IMTFI for supporting this project. And this is basically, the project is basically a continuation of ongoing work in the Philippines. And the project is pronounced as RICART. If you want to sound Italian and French at the same time. So you may want to pronounce it if you like. So it's RICART. RICART is a mixed methods tool that we developed in 2011, thanks to a prize we luckily won, to develop, to find out if the rural birthplaces of migrants, wherever is the country, are conducive for investments that come from remittances. But as a background first, at least let we bring you to the Philippines. The Philippines is a major migrant sending country. We're everywhere in the world, and that's why the joke is, if you're in Irvine, for example, and if you hear somebody say, "Psst," and you lean back, and then there's the Filipino over there. So we have 10.45 million Filipinos in all countries and in ocean-plying vessels. That's why remittances are a big deal. And for the last 40 years, remittances have reached around $240 billion, and that's a lot of money, equivalent to 10% of gross domestic production. But since these remittances are mostly coursed through consumption, that begs the question, is the Philippines reaping the benefits of this dividend from the diaspora? Because we think that there might be almost none left. And the concern also goes to the rural areas where 2/3 of those who are abroad come from, and where all migration decisions begin. And that is why RICART was developed as a rural contextualized research tool, especially given the fact that remittances are a type of financing that links people and institutions. And many of you who are from the developing world are all too familiar with the story that when you send money, there's love attached into it. But in the case of the rural hometown, which is a unit of analysis here, we are trying to bridge some disconnections that prevail. For example, investment needs in the place, the agenda of stakeholders, whether you're from overseas or from the rural hometown, and the empathy of migrants. Because in many places like Mexicans or the Latinos here, the migrants are so attached to their hometown that they would like to help, they would like to invest, they would like to save some money there. Since we had first conducted RICART in 2011, this has been the central question. How these remittances can be directed to investment and development finance, particularly in the rural birthplace. And in the conduct of RICART, these have been the variables that had been looked at. RICART, thanks to numerous donors, including the IMTFI, had been conducted in 3 rounds. It sounds like Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather really wanted to get along. In the first round was conducted in 2 municipalities. So this is Manila. So we had to travel all the way here and there. So it had become quite expensive. Round 2 was held in a province that's just nearby. So this is Metro Manila, that's where we are, and then this is the province. So for the IMTFI funded project, we went to a neighboring municipality in the same province. And given that the variable we added here was financial inclusion, so we revised the research questions a bit, but focusing on the investment conduciveness of the rural birthplace. And then since the beginning of RICART, we kind of looked at the phenomenon based on this framework that is an extension of a framework developed by the World Bank. The World Bank developed what is called the Rural Investment Climate Framework. And this is the Rural Investment Climate Framework of the World Bank. So we kind of extended it to include overseas remittances, because whether you're from overseas or from the rural birthplace, the condition, the necessities to make the birthplace conducive to investment are the same. It's just that for the remittance investment climate framework we developed, we also look at financial literacy of those with money who are from abroad and the families who receive them, and their remittance behavior and use. Because at the onset, we think that financial literacy may play a role in the whole scheme of things. For the methodology, since the beginning, we kind of employed mixed methods. In the first 2 rounds of RICART, it's quantitatively driven, but for this round, with IMTFI support, we hope to make the quanti and the quali on equal footing, especially since the first 2 rounds had seen that the surveys had really driven the findings of the study. So for the quanti, we will be implementing surveys to 3 types of respondents: migrants who are present in the hometown, and migrant and non-migrant families who had their said households. And for the qualitative part, since the beginning, we had been implementing what is called rapid rural appraisal. It's a research method employed in the agriculture sector. But in this case, and similar to round 2 of RICART, we would like to be guided by a framework on local economic competitiveness that my colleague developed for the Philippine government. So, and basically, that's the lens to look at the qualitative data. So what the framework simply says is, we would like localities in the Philippines, since this is a Philippine contextualized framework, to be locally competitive so that towards the end, the locality can become globally competitive as well. So in this framework also, there are three major indicators: economic dynamism, infrastructure, and government efficiency, and financial inclusion is part of the general criterion on economic dynamism. So what we will be presenting today, raw data, the FGD transcripts just arrived yesterday, and we will present some of these, and I hope the audience here won't mind. And since we haven't conducted the survey yet because our ethics board approval took us 5 months, and we're so, well, quite frankly, disappointed at what had happened. So we will present some results from the previous rounds of RICART because we think that these results from the past might be the same as what we will be conducting soon. So, but let me take you first to Giginto. You can pronounce it as a Gi. Repeat after me. Gi. Gin. To. Giginto. Giginto, if the Americans would like to pronounce it. So Giginto is just beside Metro Manila. So it's very near the capital region. And it is also found somewhat in the central part of Bulacan province. It is also a first-class income municipality, meaning it is close to becoming a city. Here you can see the number of businesses that are registered in the municipality. So it seems to show that business activity is vibrant in the place. Here you can also find that there are numerous financial institutions in the municipality dominated by cooperatives or credit unions because Bulacan province is actively promoting cooperativism. So each municipality competes to have their own co-op office or to form their own cooperatives, whether big or small. Well, based on the interviews we had conducted thus far, as fresh as last Friday, these are what we had discovered. So Giginto is a vibrant local economy, almost ready to become a city. It is a place with around 90,000 residents. And of course, local officials would always say that we are investment friendly. Like many municipalities in the Philippines and in other developing countries, Giginto is fueled by non-farming activities. In fact, in Giginto, we found out that there are some factories there, and a prominent business venture there is warehousing. So vegetables and fruits that come from the northern part of the Philippines are temporarily stored in areas like Giginto, and then the next day they go to Manila. There's also a real property boom there, given that there are some people who reside there who are either overseas migrants or who work in Metro Manila but want to stay in Giginto to reside, given that property prices there are quite affordable. So there's a mushrooming of subdivisions. Giginto is also proud to say that it is the first municipality in the province to computerize its real property tax information and business permits. Agriculture, it's actually an agricultural municipality, although the non-farming sector is kind of booming as of late. And by the way, since Filipinos like the Latinos are found with fiestas, for Giginto they have what is called the Halamanan Festival or the Garden Festival. It will be held next month. You might wonder why Giginto. Actually, RICART can be implemented in any municipality. It's just that for this case, since it's near to Metro Manila, so the logistics play a role here. And like many municipalities in the Philippines, there are numbers of overseas migrants. So for this municipality, there are around 2,400 of them, or nearly 5% of the total population. Although we are not able to get estimates even in the locality of how much remittances flows through that place. From the FGDs, these are some of the things we discovered. So that was just last Friday. One, given that the Philippines has a recent spate of bank closures in the last 5, 6, 7 years, so people feared even placing money in a bank. And then, of course, the usual complaint that when you want to ask for a loan, there's so much requirements, so the people get frustrated. And then we also asked some gender questions, and not surprisingly, since the first set of FGDs all had women respondents, so many of the responses show that there's more trust on women in handling remittances. What also is shown is that in Giginto, consistent with the trend in the province of Bulacan, cooperativism is active, the same with the municipality. And like what we have found in previous surveys of Ricard, there is much saving of these monies from abroad for emergencies and school. So now I give the floor to.
Okay, thank you, Jeremiah. So I'd like to present to you part of the results that we had in the first 2 rounds of Ricard. Okay. So these are some of the findings that we had. We actually tried to look at the remitters, the migrant families, and the non-migrant families. And you can see here that actually migrant families have more income earners, contrary to expectation that migration creates moral hazard and people are not working anymore. The next slide shows that this is the average family income, but definitely since migrant families have more family members working, they have more income than the non-migrant families. And the level of education relatively the same in the Philippines. A lot of people have higher education, so it doesn't matter really if you're a migrant family or non-migrant family. More or less, at least there will be some high school level of education. In terms of occupation, this is what you will see, that most of them are really, those who are non-working, working outside or inside the country are laborers or unskilled workers. This is the average remittance sent. Because we asked the sender and we asked the families, the sender said they're sending around this figures, 15,000. That's about $400, but usually it's around $300. But those who receive the money have a different estimation. They said around 14 or around 350 and 12,900. In the survey that we did, we had asked a lot of questions on financial literacy. The key of Ricard is trying to bring in the understanding that why is it that until now, with all the development, the money that had come to the Philippines, the remittances, your communities have not improved so much. So we were trying to find out if financial literacy play a big role. So we have certain questions asked. And one of the questions is this: where do you get ideas about handling money? And you will find that in all types of respondents, the result's the same. They said that their ideas is their own. It didn't come from anyone else. And most also say that they don't need financial advice. Just to give you an idea, in the Philippines, we don't teach financial literacy in the formal educational system. Therefore, if people say they get it from their own ideas, it's probably an inherited idea or an observed idea from parents or people that they work with. And how do you assess your skills? And they assess themselves to be good. Okay? But when we actually did the test to them, we asked them about interest rates, we asked them about inflation, and we asked them about loans. The answer is that you will see that most of the answer that are really higher in the loans, because it tells us that these people are involved in a lot of borrowings. But also, when you ask them about inflation, people in Magarao have very low idea about inflation. These are correct answers, okay, and Pandi. So you can see that actually the level of understanding of this key information and financial literacy is not so high. And when you ask them about financial decisions, most of the questions that are being asked are actually related to inflation, and the answers are they are all concerned about interest rates on loans. Next. And this is about savings, and we asked them if they have savings. Most of these families do have savings, but they differ in terms of the amount that they save. Okay, and some of them have very little savings, like in Maribojoc, Bohol, the savings is just like around $100 rounded. And then we asked them, what will make you invest in a financial institution, given the information given by Jeremiah earlier that they're not really wanting to save in a financial institution because of fear of there's really a trust issue. So you will see here that while the interest rate plays a big role, they also look at the reputation and reliability of the institution. And this is the financial inclusion findings that we got from the second round. And you will see that using the formal definition that people have formal information about or formal savings account or any related with microfinance, cooperative, and rural banks, you will find that across the groups that we surveyed, the response is that commercial bank, even the migrants and the remitters who are supposed to be using banks as channels for movement of the remittances, have below 50% ownership of bank accounts. And rural banks the same. So effectively, if you look at this figure, there's still much to be done in terms of expanding financial inclusion among these areas. And we asked them also, if you have extra money with your remittances, where do you put it? And many of them actually wanted to put it in a business. So, but when you look at the businesses that they have, actual business, it's less than the numbers who said they want to put it in business. And most of the business are small stores or transportation. This one, sari-sari store is just like your mom and pop in a rural area, livestock. Jeepney is the public transportation, and apartments. Okay. So what is the perception? We also asked in the Ricard questionnaire, what would make you invest and what are the constraints? And these are the answers by the migrant families and non-migrant families. They're very different views about investing. You can see that the migrant families have now a different perspective about investing compared to those who do not have migrant members in their families. But the main issue here, well, the Philippines are very expensive in terms of electricity, so many of them raise the same question. So the next steps we are doing right now is by next week or so, we'll have an opportunity to interview migrants who are, many of them had gone home to the Philippines for the Christmas holiday, so we had an opportunity to get more data from there, to start some of the surveys. And after the new year, we will full blast the interviews with the help of a local migrant association. So there is a group that facilitates things for us. And we will try to run a financial econometric model to try to find out if financial inclusion and remittances are related. And then once the survey data are complete, we will need to conduct a rural hometown conference. We have done this in Ricard 1 and 2, where all the results that we have gathered, we gathered people in the hometown centers and gave them back the results so that they'll have an idea of whatever we got from them, they need to know. So that was a very interesting interaction. We want to do it again in March, just before we submit the full report here at IMTFI. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.
And our third presentation brings us very close to where we are now. That's juggling currencies in trans-border contexts, Mexico and the United States. And this will be presented by Magdalena Villarreal, Joshua Green, and Leah Nino.
And so how do I use the pointer? This is pointer. Yeah, okay. No, but it's all right to leave it in the title. Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning. I'm very happy to be here. I think this is a very, very exciting environment to discuss issues that for us are very, very critical and important. And today we are discussing, as we were presenting, this is a project that we are carrying out together with Lia Niño and Joshua Green. And we are using the notion of juggling currencies, juggling like you juggle a ball, and currencies. If you remember yesterday, Murdoch showed a slide of a book by Viviana Selicer, The Social Meaning of Money, and she talks about different currencies, not only monetary currencies, but also social currencies, meaning that we don't only use money in our financial transactions, but we use different resources as well. And this is the point that we are pushing forward, because we want to understand how the economy of these families work. And in that, we need to understand how people resort to different currencies, including monetary, but also social, symbolic, etc., and how they have to juggle with one and the other currencies, but particularly in transborder contexts. And transborder, we mean we are working in two localities. One is the border, the physical border between Mexico and the United States, in twin cities of Mexicali and Calexico. And the other is also a border, but it is more, it is a small village located in the very, very distant location in Mexico that, however, interacts very closely with Hawaii in the United States. But we will talk about this more. But this is the way we are using border. Border is physical, but it is also it's geographical, but it is also the ways in which certain kinds of limits are placed. And so it is about juggling currencies. We are focusing basically on Mexican and binational commuters at the US-Mexico border, Mexicali and Calexico. That is the case. Binational because Mexicans, we are allowed to have several nationalities, and as you know, increasingly in this globalized world, there are people who have 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 nationalities, but we are focusing on people who have 2 Mexican and American, or only Mexican and are undocumented in the United States, or people who are commuters that commute between Mexicali and Calexico daily. They might live in Mexicali in Mexico and work in the United States, in the agricultural field or in offices or in caring for adult population or whatever, or they might live in the United States and work in Mexico. And we will talk more about why it is important for these people to have a double nationality. We also are working with Mexicans or binational workers from Sabinilla, this village that I was talking about, that is very distant from the main roads, that you have to take a dirt road to reach it, yet it is very closely linked to people in Hawaii. And there we are looking at the signification and valuation of currencies. As I said, we are saying currencies in the plural because it's pesos, dollars, but also social, cultural, and other kinds of currencies. In the intertwining of economies, cultures, normativities, and practices that we tend to conceive as different and disaggregated. Because it is 2 countries, 2 different countries, we tend to think that they are completely different, completely disaggregated, and yet they are combined in very interesting ways. That we are, of course, in the middle of finding, but in the middle of our findings, but already finding very interesting things. Now, this is just to show a map. You can see right here, Mexicali and Calexico. This is the border with the United States, and the other. Oh, oops! No, sorry. The other is Sabinilla right over here in western Mexico, but that is closely linked to Hawaii, and they have to transport themselves all the way via the United States to Hawaii. And in Calexico, this is a very close-up. People go to work in the agricultural fields or in the city of Calexico or in El Centro, California. And this is Mexicali. So they are the twin cities of Calexico and Mexicali. Now, to cross the U.S.-Mexico border, the point we want to make, but we can't hear it, can we? Okay, it's interesting to hear because you can hear the click of the. But where? Ah, okay. No. Anyway, it's all right. It's all right. It's all right. No. The point we're trying to make here. These are people that are crossing the border into Mexico. The point we're trying to make here is how many that people are constantly crossing the border. But not only people. With the people, you have family, you have workers, you have wages that cross the border every day, you have debts that cross the border, you have taxes that people pay in the United States, but they cross the border in different ways, as we will explain, because you can even use taxes as a currency. Tax returns can be a currency in Mexico. And debts cross the border, savings, investments, insurance, social benefits, social security numbers, etc. You name it. There are many, many ways, many that are crossing the border, not only people. And all these come to form part of what we are looking at in terms of trying to understand the economies and the, the economies and the currencies. In the process, people are making, as our the previous presenters from Mexico were talking about their calculations. We are also focusing a lot on the calculations that people are mentioning. But in the calculations, people are measuring the risk in different ways of different currencies. They are taking into account the perceived potential of one resource or another, the prediction of cost, how much it will cost. The social differentiation comes into the picture, whether you are Mexican, whether you are American, whether you have a green card, whether you have a resident card, whether you have documents, etc. The value considerations such as how much the Social Security number is worth, for example. You have people that rent, they call it renting the Social Security number because they have a proper job in Mexico, in Mexicali, for example, and you're not using your Social Security number, but you are already a resident, so you can rent it in exchange of tax returns. Or you get the receipts from the work and then you are able to ask for a loan in an American bank. And also so you have certain benefits. You might not get direct money for it, but you exchange it for different benefits. So there are a lot of value considerations coming into the picture. People are faced with the need to juggle currencies in two national monetary languages. They will calculate, sometimes they will calculate in dollars or they will calculate in pesos. They might be in the United States and calculate in pesos or be in Mexico calculating in dollars. And for us, it is very interesting because culturally, there is a difference between calculating in pesos and in dollars. And social and cultural values attributed to different coinages within distinct spaces of interaction for us are very important. These are the kinds of things that we are looking into in this project. We are inquiring into the multiple meanings, expectations, and normative frameworks associated with forms of money and economic resources. And this entails all sorts of things. Among these, the ways in which family arrangements are made. I have a sister in the United States, and my daughter lives with my sister, and in order to study in an American school, or I have a brother in Mexico whose address I can use for purposes with the Mexican government, etc. Or the translation of values from one currency to another is very important, how values come into the transaction. I don't want to go too much in depth into all of this, but these are the kinds of things that we are looking into in the project, and the need to also inquire into the expectations and desires that people express when talking about one currency or the other. I will pass the microphone to Lia, who will talk about the case of Calexico and Mexicali.
We understand the border region, Mexicali-Calexico, as an integrated area. In this fertile area, they have intensive activity. We are looking for the statistics. We have 60,000 persons cross daily this border. That means 21 millions per year. In these intensive activities, I'm going to talk a little bit about these amazing twin cities. For example, Mexicali is a capital of the state. This is the state Baja California. We saw in the map. This has around 1 million of population. The 10% of the population was born in USA. This is a very interesting practice there, here in this area, where we call something like birth tourism, when the mother has the babies in USA. For that reason, we have 10% of the population was born in USA. The income per capita daily is around $10, the medium. This is in Mexicali. And then in Calexico, this is a city really more smaller. It's a mix between rural and urban, more rural. Has 29,000 people. That is a high rate also of unemployment there, is around 23, 24. Another important thing is that 90% of the people in Calexico came from Mexican origin, and the income per capita is $85 per day, while in Mexicali is around $10, $15. Some information also about Calexico and Mexicali is, as Magdalena said, has an intensity transnational activity when men and women work in USA and live in Mexico. They are commuters, they cross daily for work there. Also, there is another cases that the people that live in USA and livelihood in Mexico. As I told you, there's important rural areas here in this region where most of the people who work from Mexicali who works in USA do it in agriculture. This is around 44%. Another does in the services, for example, when other activities like domestic workers or jobs related with the care. Also, another stuff very important to say that this area was hit very hard by the crisis that was in 2008, 2009, where a lot of people have their money in the USA banks, also prime mortgage or credit card debts or department store debts. A lot of people in these cases lose the house that they were paying in USA. And a lot of people have to come back to Mexico to live again in Mexico. Another have to sell the house in Mexico to keep the house in USA. But anyway, most of the people maintain the links or the webs, the social webs in this country. For a lot of activities, practices, I told you, bear children, look for after the children, etc. Here there are some pictures about the activity that we are documenting, special practices in this area, in this region. We have some pictures about this to the left side where the boy is very interesting because it's a new activity that has maybe 2-3 years that we have in Mexicali. We are in Mexicali. We are doing the line. This is my car. I'm here. We are doing the line to cross the USA, and they have a new figure. It's the dollar boy. They comes to your car and is changing the money, the currencies. And also we have it was with an example that in the first day we have here that I was talking about asking if do you think in Mexicali we have a Casa de Cambio? Exchange houses. Do you think that in a border city we have in each corner? Yes, of course we don't have in each corner, but we have a lot of these. You can see the rate are changing in each these houses. That's it.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Sabanilla. This is a village about 1,000 miles into Mexico. It's a very rural village. About 20 miles of dirt road to get there, and very small, about 20 houses, population 81, high in the mountains, 6,000 feet up, very beautiful, very rural, very isolated. The dirt road dead ends, you have to cross 2 rivers after the village in order to go to the next village, and so there's very little cross traffic, a lot of isolation, and historically there's been very little work opportunities here. These people used to manage, these were ranches, they used to manage the cattle for the large hacendados in the region. And currently there's some work, some of the people still do that. Maybe 3 or 4 of the villagers ride horses a couple hours each morning to go manage herds of cattle in other places, but there's very little economic activity. There's a lot of economic activity, but very little economic activity in terms of people having jobs, formal jobs. So about 50 years ago, the community, there were some members who were in California working as migrants in a Denny's, and the owner of the Denny's suggested that the workers go with him to Hawaii to open up a new Denny's, and since then the village has been migrating directly to Hawaii. Almost everyone in the village migrates to Hawaii. This is Chaibella. She's been to Hawaii. These are her nephews. Their father has also been to Hawaii. There are a few people who haven't been to Hawaii, but for the most part, migration has been the main resource for survival in this village. So what we've been doing are structured interviews, about 120 questions, looking at household assets and linkages with institutions and resources from governments, as well as relatives, remittances, as well as what kinds of things other than money the villagers bring back from the U.S., which in this case we're looking at Bacho, one of the cases we'll discuss here. He brought back lots of tools. He's kind of represents the entrepreneurial spirit. He sells his labor. He also works at restaurants. Most of the villagers have worked in the tourism economy in Hawaii, And when you come to this village, you eat very well. They've been Thai chefs, they've been Italian chefs, they've been, they love blue cheese and make good wings, and it's not a bad place to do research. The traditional economy here is agriculture, ranching, more than anything maintaining other people's cows, and dairy cattle specifically. We see over here one of the grandmothers in the early morning with her granddaughter working with the cows. Agriculture here is based on supplying the needs of the cattle more than the human needs, so they grow corn to make into silage to feed to the cows. And they also make cheeses. But in the kind of globalized structure of agriculture, those in the village who do have a few cows, maybe 10 at the most, find it very difficult to actually pay for or to save. The price of milk is not as great as what it could be, and they end up selling all their product to the neighboring town, and so they're kind of dislocated in a certain way. This village is very interesting. They've really kind of immersed themselves in what we call maybe a green economy, and a number of the villagers. This is an eco tour who's come to the village to look at how to increase soil retention in mountainsides, how to build small greenhouses, how to use biofilters to clean water, how to build solar water heaters. These are oyster mushrooms. Some of the villagers have experimented with alternative crops, trying to find ways to survive, including other types of animal husbandry. Pigs, goats, special kinds of pigs that you can make into wonderful hams. But in general, they've continued to struggle, and many of the migrants who come back bring small amounts of money with them. They try to start small businesses, try to do new things, and very quickly run out of money and go back. So in this case, we're looking at, briefly, we're going to compare two cases. One is Guillermo, who's according to our normative framework of economic success, maybe he's the least successful in the village, although he's pretty happy. But he owns a 47-year-old mule, that's his one asset, and he rents out his labor occasionally. He's not known to show up on time or work too long. And he pairs up, this is him pairing up his mule with his brother's horse and doing a little plowing. And this is him working, selling his labor with his family. He has his young sons working alongside him, his daughter who takes care of the baby, and his wife who also works alongside him. And in comparison, so Guillermo went to the United States 4 times, didn't really learn English, never really, he ended up working in the bowels of the restaurants, cleaning dishes and making little money. Supporting the 5 children was quite a burden. He didn't save any assets. His brother Bacho is kind of the opposite, maybe the most successful in the village or one of the successful cases. But in the comparison, both the successful and the unsuccessful migrants, when they return, they continue to have difficulties. Bacho came home and he bought the former hacienda. He saved several $100,000, rebuilt it. He bought about 25 acres. And he's really, like I said, the entrepreneurial spirit. He sells his labor, but he also works at a local restaurant. He does a little sharecropping on the side with other farmers. He puts together work crews. Is continuously working on how to get by. Okay, so what we're really looking at are this idea of working with debt, how these guys, more than just being able to conceive of how to move forward, with Bacho, we are talking about somebody who can get lots of debt or get lots of credit because he's known as a hard worker and he'll show up on time and he can bring a crew of men to help. With La Bala, Guillermo, he much would rather prefer to hunt and provide the village with a deer that he killed in the night or something that, some provision. He's known as a provider, And so when he gets debt, he also has good credit, but he doesn't necessarily pay it back on time, but he's very generous. He buys everyone beers, and everyone has a good time when he finally has some money. Okay. And so we're looking at how these migrants in the United States and in Mexico, they're in daily communication back and forth between Hawaii and, in Leah's case, on the border, how they're managing these multiple frameworks of calculation, how they're thinking about not just their assets, but also their behavior, their appearance, their participation in these networks. And looking at how in parallel economies, both in the United States and in Mexico, they're turning these kind of networks as well as other resources into actual capital. So the networks that I speak of, a family that's been migrating 50 years to the United States is a lot safer than a family that's just beginning to migrate. They've formed the ways and the routes, and they know how to do things safely. They have safe coyotes. And when they get to Hawaii, they can work in places where they won't be caught. In both cases, they're looking at anticipation and potential value in terms of if they make the $6,000 journey to the United States, and it will take a year to pay off, what they could get back. Anticipating, in some cases, there have been deaths on the border. In some cases, they get locked up and incarcerated. And in Leah's cases, we see people working, same thing, working in the United States with illegal visas. And again, they're doing this kind of anticipation or calculation of risk. We're looking at the mobilization of resources, how they can put together things that are not what we necessarily think of as actual money resources, but how they can put together a handful of resources and either grow or continue to survive. And again, this operation of networks with information as well as double standards. And so, okay, I've been told we're running out of time here, but let's, and looking at how they exploit the ambiguities on the border, being able to cross illegally or legally, and how different people respond to opportunities differently. La Bala, the Guillermo case, with opportunities, he may or may not jump on it. In the Bacho's case, he's there already. And again, managing identities when people are looking for credits, or if they're looking for visas, they dress in a certain way, they act in a certain way. When they go to Hawaii, they try to fit in a certain way. And thank you very much.
We'd like to open it now to questions for the three groups.
Hi, Dunge from Kenya. My question is probably to the group from Philippines first, and then probably also Mexico. It's on remittances. I'm just curious, you seem like your unit of analysis is the household, family, in sending money back to Philippines, is that correct? And yet, is the household or family or the individual?
Yeah, it's the household.
Okay. And my
and the locality.
Okay, so my question is, because one of the things you're looking at is development in the rural local area. Recognizing there are so many diaspora networks in the US and Europe, have you looked at all? I mean, those are the networks that would more likely, and we see that's what they're doing. They tend to send money back to their countries to address a development issue, whether it's health, an emergency, whatever it is. Have you looked at linking those unit of analysis, the family unit, to these networks? Have you looked at all at the diaspora networks that people can link to? Because sometimes as an individual, they may not feel their money is gonna make much of a difference. But if they put it within a network, it could make much of a broader.
I guess the context to your question is if migrants are organized as groups in the destination country, In the case of the municipality that we're studying right now, we haven't actually found. But as a general context, the Philippines has a lot of destination countries. Okay. In some municipalities we had studied before, they are organized into groups. In many of them, in some others, like Giginto, thus far we haven't found any organized group. That is why in the previous rounds of Ricard, we noticed that that there is a dispersion of the destinations of these overseas migrants and their relatives overseas. In the case of that, Migrant House also answered. So we would wish that there would be a migrant association in the municipality. Then let's see if there could be some influences here and there, similar to what we usually see in Mexico. At least in the case of the municipality we're studying right now, we haven't found any. But I think, given the previous experiences we had, regardless of where you went, in terms of the destination country, the financial behavior is almost the same. And that is also regardless of the immigration status, whether you are a temporary migrant, like in Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, or you are a permanent resident, like in the US or Canada or Australia. We found in previous rounds it's all the same. It's almost the same.
Okay, in the little village I'm working in, and I would make the case in Mexico in general, but I don't know if that's a good case to make, but I think the unit of analysis has to be the family. The family is such an important kind of structure. And in terms of migrant networks, there's a lot of evidence, and there's been programs in this little village, the 3-for-1 program where the state and the federal government matched the contributions of the migrants if it was for a public good. That was somewhat successful. They ended up, you drive 10 miles on a very rough dirt road that will beat up your car, and then you get to a section that's been, a 100-yard section where they have a nice part of the road, and that's what the fund was for. So it's hard to sustain those kinds of irrational behaviors, but yeah.
Let me just quickly add that obviously networks are absolutely critical in the Mexicali case as well, in both cases, in remittances. In migration. You definitely need the networks in order to operate for anything. Leah was talking about the birthing tourism. Of course, in the border areas, Mexicans often want to have their babies born in the United States so that they can have American citizenship, or they can have double citizenship. And for that, you need networks. You need an address in the United States. To have an address in the United States, you need an address in the United States is a very useful commodity. And for that, you need networks. You also need networks to have loans from banks in the United States. You need networks to buy insurance. You need, etc. So networks are a very, very critical resource in migration. Not necessarily formally organized networks, but definitely networks. And as Josh was saying, family is critical. Without a family, in a very, very extended family. When he says our unit of analysis is family, in the village, family means 3 or 4 or 5 households, not one household. So, or all of the households.
This is also not to say that in the Philippine case we don't have networks. In fact, many overseas migration is driven by networks, whether you're within a family or a clan or in the neighborhood. So the networks operate not just for the sake of helping others migrate, but also to help the hometown. And helping the hometown is one of the inspirations why we developed the mixed methods tool called RIC.
Hi, I'm Caroline Schuster at the Australian National University, and I have a question for Magdalena, Joshua, and Leah. I love this metaphor of juggling. It's great, especially in the context of our broader discussions about mobile money, which can often seem very kind of transactional or about conversions, this idea of simultaneity, lots going on at the same time, keeping the balls in the air. So I was wondering, there's a kind of long tradition in feminist scholarship on women and work about women's capacity for juggling. In my field site in Paraguay, we talk about mujeres muy activas, right? Like women who are doing a lot of things all at once and juggling domestic labor with work opportunities, often moving around in order to maintain that simultaneity. So I wonder if you could say something about the kind of gendered aspect of that metaphor and also how you see it playing out in these really dynamic and different borderland contexts where juggling seems so pervasive.
Definitely, yes. Very good point. Everybody, but particularly women, have to juggle. And here, if we include the normative frameworks that they have to juggle with. So this is, in order to use a certain currency, they have to juggle with normative frameworks. And for women, that is critical. Women have to take into account the normative frameworks in their home villages when they are in the United States. When they are migrating, they have to behave in such a way that will be morally accepted in their own village, for example. So in terms of gender, there is quite a bit of difference in the ways in which they are able to juggle and the amount of issues that they have to, the balls that they have to have in the air at the same time. Yes, definitely. But Leah wants to add something. Josh, sorry.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to present a real quick case of a family that went to Hawaii for 20 years, bought the beautiful farm of their dreams, and then found it to be unsustainable in the marketplace, and sent the father back to Hawaii. And now the mother manages 60 sheep, many pigs and cows, and the father's in Hawaii calling sometimes twice a day to check on how the farm's being run. And she's standing up, you know, in waist high in some kind of mud, complaining that this is not the dream that you know, that was his dream and he's in Hawaii. I mean, and I'm not sure I'm specifically answering that, but it's certainly very vivid. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. And about it, yes, this is very interesting, the activity that plays the women in this region. For example, we have cases where a woman works in both sides, in Calexico, in Mexicali, sometimes during the week. It's very interesting. Also, a lot of doesn't work legally. That means they have a visa for work there, but for pass to USA, but not for work. Anyway, they are working, sometimes the weekends, they make arrangements. Some people pass the suitcase, all this stuff. We found another woman that worked half years in Mexico and half years in USA when is the activity, the rural activity, and they miss all these jobs. For example, all the management or the activity for the double nationality, the women make all these activities and they combine with transnational jobs. Yes.
Hi, I also have a question about juggling currencies, more particularly on the border itself. My name's Erin Taylor. I did research on the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and the two towns were only about 1 kilometre apart. In the Haitian town, you could pay using either good or pesos. In the Dominican town, you could only pay with pesos. It was very rare you could pay with anything with good, and that reflects the power differences between the two sides. As the Haitians were a lot poorer, and they were the ones who would migrate across the border or travel across the border daily to sell their labour, sell goods in the market, and so on and so forth. So I was just wondering if you have any perspectives on that question of, you know, who juggles.
Well, we asked that question particularly. And yes, it is incredible that in this isolated little village in the middle of nowhere, they will accept dollars. and they happily, yes, and you wonder what they're going to do with them. Yet they don't accept, you can't pay with dollars in the big city of Guadalajara, but you can in this village. And of course in Mexicali and Calexico you can also use pesos and dollars. But it has to do, of course, what you're talking about has to do with power and hierarchies and which of course takes us to another area of discussion about the value of currencies and why the differentiation, the differentiated value. It's very interesting in the Mexicali case, for example, that people have credit cards from the United States, or they will have Mexican credit cards, and how and where and under what circumstances they use it. And for example, how somebody having one credit card in the United States can lend the credit card to friends and family. So with her credit card, some people can pay in Walmart, and then they will pay her, and whether they pay in pesos and in dollars. All this, it leads to really interesting normative and cultural considerations that we are looking into. In the end, we are ending up with so much information that we're not sure how we're going to manage. But really, it is. I mean, that is a very interesting point. Yes.
Yes, we have a question in the back.
Jeremiah and Alvin, thank you very much for interesting presentation. My question to you is, given the fact that America is the only developed nation that taxes its citizens outside of the US, is there a tax treatment for Filipinos that work overseas? And if so, does Pacquiao fall under OFW?
Actually, there's no tax for Filipinos working abroad. So it's if you work abroad, they think, well, it's assumed that you're paying taxes where you're working. So but you don't have to pay the Philippine government taxes. But when like Pacquiao comes to fight in the US, he has to pay taxes here. So he's not going to be taxed back home, except that when he declares his total income, so there should be some qualifications on that. So I'm not a tax expert, but I learned that he has some questions on that. So that's why he was being charged with tax evasion, not necessarily from the U.S.
And just a quick question, given that you are from the two leading universities in the Philippines, if I combine your two universities with FEU and De La Salle, what portion of these graduates are actually working overseas? If you know.
I think for the Ateneo, easily the fresh graduates gets an offer to work abroad. So, but not many really go out. So the proportion maybe 10%, because the structure of Philippine migration is not really professionals. More than 50% would be with technical and lower skilled. So since the universities are offering professional courses in that matter, I would say that not many, maximum of 20%. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mudita, and I'm from IFMR in India. And my question is both for the team in Mexico as well as the Philippines. A very interesting finding that came that seems common is the reinvestment in the local economy, starting up entrepreneurial ideas back home. And one thing that I noticed is that the team in Mexico did say that people do have trouble getting new businesses off ground, and they often have to go back to Hawaii to earn a living. And I was wondering why that was the case. Is it because the town itself was too small and there weren't enough people to sort of help sustain and grow the business? Or was it because of some other lack of entrepreneurial abilities? And similarly in Philippines, sort of what was the trend that was noticed, the businesses that were started by the money that was coming in? What was the success rate and what were the reasons why things were succeeding or not?
I'll start this just to talk about Sabanilla some more. I like the village. Okay, so I followed a couple cases where migrants returned and had about $10,000 and invested in different ways. Tried to start a small carnitas stand, which is a wonderfully cooked pork meat that they took to a local tourism village and really divided the community in a lot of ways. They were lots of division about who was working harder and how the profits were being spent and how much gas was being, and it became this divisive thing. Actually, same guys, but then they invested in a small store in the village. The village is so small it has a small store, and they put another small store right in front of the former small store, which was one of their cousins. So now they have two competing cousins with very small stores, and they really only sell alcohol. It became the big selling item, and the grandmother ended up taking the store and saying, "I'm the only one who has the store now, and it's too much division in the community." I think you see, in the case of Bacho, this guy was very entrepreneurial. I brought lots of money back. They save in their cattle, and so this idea of continuing to grow cattle stock is very prevalent. But he's, they're in a globalized market. The idea of having 10 cows when competing farmers have 1,000 cows or more, it's very difficult. This idea of bringing back a romantic dream of having a small farm and living happily ever after is not. So there's, I would say, some romanticism, some certainly a lack of understanding of local markets. There are some cases of people who were pizza chefs in Chicago and came back with the Chicago pizza style, and took many months before people would, lock onto the idea to even try it. And slowly they're finding some success. But I think, the population has grown in this little village and in this region. The population continues to grow, and agricultural interests continue to consolidate, and these guys continue to be very small farmers in a very big marketplace. So that's a very short answer, but.
Well, we've reached 12:30, but I want to make sure that no one is left holding the microphone with a burning question.
Yes, to answer.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank these three presentations for showing us that it's not only money that's mobile, but rather the affective and the physical labor that goes into making money mobile. So let's give them one more round of applause.